After being hit by a car and suddenly forced into a life in a wheelchair, my husband handed me divorce papers that were already filled out.
You got yourself into that wheelchair because of your carelessness. I don't want to deal with caregiving. Please, let's get a divorce. I have no intention of cleaning up your mess.
I was engulfed in darkness as my husband coldly uttered these words. Despite supporting him for 40 years, I couldn't forgive this treatment. A flame of anger ignited within me. My name is Mary. I just celebrated my 60th birthday recently. I've been married to George, who is 3 years older than me, for 40 years. We met during my community college days. Back then, I enjoyed drinking coffee at the small cafe he owned. His parents ran the cafe, and George, with his smart appearance, worked as a waiter. He listened to me in a friendly way, even when he wasn't interested, and I was attracted to his friendly way of talking to any customer. Over a year, I made my move, and we started dating. After I graduated, we decided to get married. Some friends said it was too soon, but I wanted to reassure my elderly grandmother who raised me, so we registered our marriage. As I had braced myself for, my grandmother passed away, content after seeing our wedding, leaving me with only an uncle in some distant town as my remaining family. But I was not lonely. Because George's parents treated me like their own daughter. We lived together at my husband's parents' house, a 10-minute walk from the cafe. I felt really comfortable and experienced the happiness of my family. George's parents were strict yet kind in teaching me the ropes of the business, and a year into our marriage, our lovely daughter, Lisa, was born, bringing me immense happiness. Soon after, the economic bubble began, and George's parents retired, probably wanting to pass on the cafe during the good times. They moved to a vacation home they had apparently bought, and while I felt lonely, I sent them off with a smile, respecting their decision. The cafe soon became George's in name and reality, and I joined him in running it. Luckily, I had been thoroughly trained by his parents in everything from the menu to bookkeeping right after our marriage. George had also learned by their side, and with our loyal customers, the cafe's business was stable. However, as the national economy improved and without his parents' oversight, George started to neglect his work.
Just going out for a bit.
What? It's almost lunchtime. Don't you see my back turned? As he hurriedly left the cafe, I showed him our daughter, peacefully sleeping in her baby carrier. Believing in the so-called 3-year myth that children should not be away from their parents before age 3, George had insisted that I carry our young daughter to the cafe. If you're gone, and she gets fussy or dirty her diaper, there'll be no one to serve the customers if I have to step away. That's going to be a problem.
It'll be fine. It's mostly regular anyway. They won't mind waiting a bit, or if we cut some corners, not with our prices.
Oh my gosh. I was speechless at his careless attitude, unbecoming of someone in the food service industry. But he wasn't entirely wrong. In those days of rare economic boom, our customers were spending freely. Our menu items, ranging from a few dollars to just over 10. My husband thought that our customers were mostly regular customers and would accept our small price increase, and that new customers would forgive us at this price. We were doing so well that customers appreciating my hard work while juggling child rearing even tipped me. Additionally, without the widespread internet, word of mouth, for better or worse, didn't spread easily, and many establishments with lower quality than ours managed to survive. Nevertheless, I wanted our customers to leave feeling that was delicious. I felt refreshed, and I didn't want to tarnish a reputation of the cafe handed down by George's parents, so I attended to every customer, table, dish, coffee, and my daughter, managing the work single-handedly. The small cafe, especially without a peak time, was manageable by me alone, and thanks to the economic boom, we made a good profit. But that was the problem. Hey, there's an order, a new customer, 2 sandwich sets with coffee.
No, I can make them right now. You handle it. So, about that horse I bet on. It hit big.
Stunned, I bustled about while George casually brushed me off and continued chatting with regulars across the counter. Originally, George handled the kitchen, and I managed the customer service, but knowing I could handle all, he increasingly shirked his duties. After finishing the prep work and opening the shop, he would chat with regular customers or read the racing paper, watching me work as if it were someone else's problem. When I complained, he'd say nonchalantly, "You're managing fine on your own, so I don't really need to step in." At times, he would even leave the cafe during business hours to hang out with regulars. Around that time, his parents passed away, and his inheritance rolled in, which probably contributed to his laziness. His neglect wasn't limited to work. Believing that women should handle housework and childcare, he ignored our crying daughter, saying, "Change her diaper, or isn't it time for her meal? Feed her," without lifting a finger to help. As a result, I was left to juggle running the cafe, household chores, and childcare, leading to an exhaustingly busy life. By the time our daughter was in elementary school, the economic bubble finally burst, and customers no longer spent money as freely. Even regulars nudged him, and George finally started to work again, though his work ethic after years of laziness left much to be desired. But I couldn't just point that out without upsetting him. Criticized by me, he'd threatened to use the cafe as leverage in our arguments. Considering his parents' feelings, I had no choice but to back down, swallowing my mounting frustration with George to quietly support him for the cafe's stability and ensure sufficient sales. He still didn't help with household chores or parenting, and his lazy habits persisted. But I told myself supporting him was my role as a wife and worked desperately. Now, after 40 years of marriage, our cafe has survived multiple recessions. Our daughter, who helped as the face of the cafe, has married a wonderful man, moved out, and now has a young son, a responsible mother herself. George and I talked less and enjoyed more time to ourselves, which isn't unusual for couples our age. I even thought our relationship was better than other mature couples, since we still shared meals and slept together, proud of raising our daughter and running the cafe together, despite the ups and downs. The only issue left was succession. One rainy evening, when I hadn't expected it and lacked an umbrella. What should we do? I didn't think it would rain, and I don't have an umbrella. Do you have one?
No, I don't.
It's not far from home, but I don't want to get wet and catch a cold. I don't want to take that risk at my age. George tossed me the keys to the bike parked at the shop.
Get home before it pours. Riding the bike, you'll make it before it gets too bad. I'm heading out for drinks with my friends anyway, so I'll lock up the cafe.
He urged me to hurry home. So I left the cafe first, starting dinner. About an hour later, I realized I had left my smartphone at the cafe. With George out drinking with friends, not having my phone even for a night was inconvenient. Rushing back to the cafe, I saw two figures moving in the darkened space and gasped, thinking, "Thieves." While debating calling the police, my hand accidentally turned on the light, and I almost collapsed from under my feet when I saw the two figures in the light. It was my husband and a beautiful woman whom I did not know who was in his arms.
What are you doing here?
He stammered, and overwhelmed by the suspicious atmosphere, I fled the scene. In my panic from witnessing George's betrayal, I didn't notice the flashing traffic light. Next thing I knew, I was dazzled by car headlights, felt intense pain, and then everything went black. When I regained consciousness, I was in a hospital bed, with my disheveled daughter peering worriedly at me.
Thank goodness, nurse. Please come, my mom's awake.
Piecing together the doctor and my daughter's accounts, I had been hit by a car and remained unconscious for 3 days. I had no ID, but fortunately, a regular customer at the cafe who witnessed the accident contacted George. My daughter, informed by George, explained the situation to her husband and son, and came to me that day. A few days after waking up, with my family around me in the doctor's office, I faced the harsh reality. I had suffered spinal damage from the accident, and could no longer walk or bathe alone. I needed full-time care and would have to use a wheelchair. Struck speechless by the doctor's words, both George and my daughter seemed unable to hide their shock. But I wasn't weak enough to despair. My daughter's daily visits and support helped me endure the tough rehabilitation and adapt to life in a wheelchair. As I gained mental strength, memories of that dreadful event resurfaced. Who was that woman, and what were they doing in the dark? Even when I tried contacting him using the smartphone my daughter had found and brought to me, I got no response. While contemplating how to confront him, my phone rang. It was a message from George. He seems to have something to tell me. Was it an apology or just excuses? Determined to settle things once and for all, we decided to have a conversation. The next day, George visited my hospital room empty-handed. Since the wheelchair verdict, he hadn't shown his face once, and the first thing he said upon entering wasn't out of concern or care for me but a private room. Talk about luxury. Suppressing my irritation at his insensitivity, I calmly said, I took advantage of an offer from the person responsible for the accident. Besides compensation, they agreed to cover all medical expenses.
You played it smart. That must have brought in a pretty penny, huh?
What's with that tone? Don't talk about me like I'm some kind of con artist. George responded with a smirk.
Don't get mad. It's true a lot of money came in. Makes it easier to bring this up.
What? I was speechless as George, sitting in the chair beside the bed, pulled out a small folded paper from his pocket.
I hate to spring this on you, but let's get divorced.
It was a filled-out divorce form. What? Excuse me. I had to look twice. I couldn't grasp what was happening, totally blindsided by George's actions.
I told you I needed to talk to you.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I've been fed up for a while now. I can run the business just fine on my own, but you always had to butt in, making it unbearable.
But that cafe is important to me, given to us by your parents.
That's where you're wrong. That cafe is mine. I even thought about selling it because I was sick of your nagging, and you begged me on your knees not to.
At that time, after the bubble burst, finding another job was tough, and we had no qualifications. Losing the business would have troubled our daughter, you know that.
I've been thinking it's been strange since then. The cafe was passed down to me, yet I can't do anything with it freely because of my family.
I flinched at George's shouting. Because of my family, you said. I was dumbfounded, treating our life of mutual support like we were a nuisance. George continued, venting his pent-up frustrations.
Even at home, you're always frowning, bitterly poring over the bookkeeping. Also, you used work as an excuse, leaving the housework half done.
Well, we both worked, and someone had to do the bookkeeping. That's not all, having to report everything I do, even though I'm not a child, feels ridiculous. As George listed his complaints, my trust in him eroded, replaced by rising anger. Was he trying to ignore his own betrayal? After what he did, I couldn't let him have the last word. Checking in with each other is normal when you live together, and you say going out to play, but was it really just that?
Whoops.
George was at a loss for words, so I pressed on. That day, you were embracing a woman in the dark cafe. I wouldn't have had the accident if I hadn't seen that. Are you planning to be with her after we divorce? I glared and interrogated him. Yet George, far from flinching, nonchalantly replied,
Blaming me? I don't know what you're misunderstanding, but she and I are not involved like that. Got any proof?
No proof. I held back my anger at my husband, who laughed triumphantly. His ugly smile wiped away whatever little affection I had left. How cruel. You don't care at all that I've ended up like this.
You're in that wheelchair because of your own carelessness. I don't want to deal with caregiving. Let's get a divorce. I'm not going to clean up your mess.
Dad, there are things you just don't say.
We both turned toward the door, where our daughter stood, trembling with anger.
How long have you been there?
I thought I shouldn't butt in on a marital issue, but I can't stand it anymore. I heard everything. Mom's condition is ultimately because Dad had an affair, isn't it?
Angered by our daughter's outburst, George snorted dismissively.
If you're so concerned, why don't you take care of her? I'm done with this life, taking care of her till the end. I'm out.
That's despicable.
Say what you want. You're not a child anymore. You should have some idea about these things between men and women.
My daughter bit her lip. Her eyes burned with anger. Perhaps it was her anger that cooled my head. As I looked at the divorce papers, I asked George, what was all my effort for, then? I thought I was doing my best for you. Are you just going to discard me because I'm not useful anymore?
It's your annoying self-righteousness that's infuriating. Being free while you were in the hospital reminded me of the good old days. I can't go back to our old life now. This is a good chance for both of us to be free.
Fed up with George's view of my accident as an opportunity, I agreed to the divorce. I didn't want to stay with such a man any longer, but I wanted what I was owed. When I brought up the division of assets, he visibly soured, but I managed to get an agreement. I would receive all the compensation from the accident, and in exchange for leaving the house and cafe untouched, I'd take 60% of our savings.
Let's just get this over with. I'll withdraw your share now. Sign the divorce papers in the meantime.
Saying this, George hurriedly left the room. Alone, I turned to my daughter. I'm sorry for exposing you to this mess, honey, and I'm afraid I'll be a burden until I settle down.
Don't worry about it. I'm on your side, Mom. Are you sure about those terms, though?
It's fine. Sorry to spring this on you, but could you stop by the house and pack my personal items? Do you remember where everything is?
No worries, Mom. I've been cleaning and organizing every time I visit. I know where the valuables are. Leave it to me.
After seeing my daughter off, I faced the divorce papers again. I wouldn't let this end on his terms. I realized the tough reality George would face. Later, I signed the divorce papers in front of him. He snatched the document with a satisfied smile.
Okay, we're strangers now.
As he left, beaming, I said quietly, "Sorry to ruin your happiness, but you'll probably regret this."
No way. You'll regret it. No one cares about a wheelchair-bound old lady, and you'll likely end up senile. But don't contact me. We're strangers now. Take care.
After he left, my daughter messaged that she had finished packing. My decluttering for end-of-life planning paid off, and she was done quickly. She even sent photos of the packed items. The box containing my valuables was also in place. I didn't mind losing the rest. At the same time that I sent my daughter a message of thanks, I received a message from one of my regular customers that she was going to visit me. Perfect timing. Let's add a bit of flair to the thorny path he's chosen. The visitor, known in the neighborhood for loving gossip, spilled the beans without my asking. Apparently, George had bragged about winning a bet, and immediately took a famous club hostess to a casino. That is the beautiful woman I saw then. And the cafe hadn't opened once since my accident, which was astonishing.
I was surprised to hear from your daughter. What's going on?
As I shared the story of our divorce, her eyes filled with sympathy and anger. After offering strong words of support, she left the room. Alone, I smirked, relieved to have had the chance to use my eye drops. What will happen next, I wonder? About a month after the accident, I was discharged from the hospital. A few months later, having adjusted to life in a wheelchair, I ventured out to a large shopping mall. The food court was empty since it was a weekday. As I settled into a seat, I was approached by a voice.
Hey, aren't you Mary?
Turning around, I saw George, who had aged rapidly in the past few months. His hair was now streaked with gray and unkempt, and he looked every bit the part of a worn-out old man in his wrinkled shirt and chinos. His daily struggles were evident in his appearance. Meanwhile, I had cut my hair short soon after being discharged from the hospital, looking neat and made up today. I hate to say it, but I think I look younger than my actual age.
You've changed a lot.
Well, I hardly had any time for myself when I was married to you, between the housework and the job. At my sarcastic response, George forced a smile.
So, you must be bored to death now. Why not help out a little with the business before you go senile?
Just as I thought.
What?
I bet the cafe isn't doing well, right? George's forced smile froze at my words. It seemed I had hit the mark. I figured as much. After all, I was the one actually running the kitchen, the floor, and the finances. George, who had slacked off and played around during the boom years, had lost his touch in the kitchen and everything else. He couldn't remember cooking procedures, messed up the priorities, and even struggled with the cash register. I had been supporting him, preempting his actions in the guise of help. I did everything from cooking and serving to preparing food, mixing condiments, cleaning dishes, ordering sweets, cakes, tea, and coffee beans, managing inventory, and handling taxes. No wonder things didn't go smoothly without me. Did you enjoy your trip to the casino? Maybe she could help you out.
No, I don't know her anymore. She ran off when I asked her to help with the cafe.
George was half angry, but she was a hostess. Her interest was probably only in George when he was a big spender. Ironically, it was just a fling, just as George had once said. George continued with difficulty.
I don't know why, but even the regular old ladies stopped coming. They used to hang around the cafe all the time. I don't get it.
It's obvious you made enemies out of the regulars.
Really?
George seemed to disdain them for lingering due to their chatty nature, but those ladies who stayed long also spent money and were valuable customers of our cafe. It seemed my friend had spread the word about George's betrayal effectively. They were my friends, too, thinking they would come as usual after you cheated on your wife and caused her to have an accident was naive. A cafe run by a cheating husband becomes a target of disdain. That you didn't realize this. I sighed, exasperated.
We're short on help, and it's been nothing but losses lately. At this rate, the cafe will go under.
Well, we're strangers now, aren't we? It's not my problem. As I tried to move away, George grabbed my wheelchair. Hey.
You must have done something. Otherwise, why would everything start going wrong so suddenly?
I recoiled, caught off guard, when suddenly I heard.
Dad, what in the world are you doing?
I looked toward the voice and saw my daughter standing there, puzzled.
Oh, Lisa.
George quickly let go and approached Lisa with a strained smile, as if nothing had happened.
Sorry to spring this on you, but can you live with me?
What?
We're short-staffed at the cafe, and I can't manage the house, so I need help. If you, the former star of the cafe, return, it could fill the gap left by Mary. If you come, I'll let your whole family live in the family home. There's plenty of room, no need to worry about rent. And eventually, I'll pass the cafe on to you. How about it? It's not a bad deal, right?
Dad.
With a smile, my daughter firmly stated.
You must be joking.
Not joking.
You've always dumped everything on Mom, from work to household chores, and did nothing yourself. Now you want to play the father and have your daughter take care of you? That's way too convenient.
George was speechless at her cutting words. Without pausing, she continued.
Did you forget how you acted while Mom was hospitalized? After doing what you did, how can you say such things? Do you think I'd live with someone who so carelessly discarded his wife, who supported him desperately for 40 years? Truthfully, I want to end even our parent-child relationship. I would refuse even if offered a fortune.
George was stunned, not expecting such a vehement rejection from his own daughter.
I was out of my mind back then.
At least you've realized that. But I won't live with you
Why?
because we're already living with Mom.
What?
My daughter had come to pick me up from the hospital and took me home to live with her family, who all encouraged me to stay.
Then wouldn't living with me be better? No need for care hassles.
Unfortunately for you, we're not enduring our living situation.
What? She's just a burden who can't do anything.
Did you forget what the doctor said? I may be paralyzed from the waist down, but I'm healthy from the waist up. Since moving in, I've been in charge of cooking.
Oh,
George seemed to remember finally.
Besides, care means only help with baths or moving from wheelchair to car. And with a growing boy and both parents working, we hardly manage to cook proper meals. Since Mom started cooking for us, we've been eating a full meal with delicious coffee after dinner, and we're all healthier. It's no wonder, given her 40 years in the food business. Even her sweets were popular at the cafe.
George remained frozen, stunned by my daughter's bright smile. As I exchanged a look with her, we started to leave. Suddenly, George dropped to his knees and hands in front of me, crying out,
I was wrong. I've realized how important daily life and the cafe were since you left. Please, let's remarry.
I sighed deeply. Even with all this, my mind is made up. Absolutely not. I respectfully decline. As I declared this, George reached out, pleading, Wait, please wait. My daughter quickly moved the wheelchair away. Soon after, triggered by my refusal, George began to create a scene and was escorted away by security guards. Wanting to avoid further entanglement with him, we left the mall and went elsewhere for a meal. After the ordeal, I felt surprisingly at peace. 6 months later, I heard through the grapevine that George's cafe had closed. He sold his house and tried to increase the money through horse racing, but lost heavily. Now, he lives in an older public housing complex, getting by on a meager pension. Meanwhile, I use my free time to conduct cooking classes, charging only for the ingredients. I held cooking classes wherever there were kitchen facilities. Some schools even started cooking clubs with me as a guest lecturer. With the retro cafe trend, traditional cafe menus are a hit. Although the accident took my lower body's freedom, it led to an unexpectedly happy retirement. I'm reclaiming 40 years of my life, intending to live freely for the rest.